Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the second of our two back to school specials. As always, Mob United loves to encourage, highlight, and share as our kiddos are returning to the schoolhouse, whether that's college, elementary school, junior high, or high school. And as a parent of four, I'm clapping it up for all of the parents who are getting their houses back, who are getting their refrigerators back, who are not having to feed their kids through the summer. So congratulations to you two, and we want to just continue to pray that our students have a wonderful, wonderful year. As you know, Mob United is truly invested in how our children, in particular how our sons do in school. The school to prison pipeline is real, is out there, and it happens everywhere. We have watched how school has evolved from peace officers who are unarmed to armed police officers to just a whole host of changes where our children are criminalized, Black boys especially, as they are essentially prepared to go to the jailhouse straight from the schoolhouse. And so that is one of the reasons why I am so excited to sit here with Dr. Sherry. She is an author, she is an educator, she is a mob mom, but most of all, she is an advocate for our Black men and boys. And she is on the front lines of that story. She is on the front lines of being the change from the inside on out. So welcome, Dr. Sherry. So much. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you this evening?
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I am wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, I think you have a delay in hearing me. So we're gonna work through that. We know how technology goes. And we're gonna work through all of that. So why don't we start out with you just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I am Dr. Sherry Pugh, as she shared. I am an educator. This is my second career. I started 2 weeks ago, started year number 23 in education. Those all those years have been at the secondary level. And I work with specifically our students with disabilities. I am the vice principal for ESC services in Volusia County, which is located in Florida. I am a mom of two amazing Black males. I'm a wife, and I am a proud grandmother of little Miss Harmony, who is 3 years old. So I am proud to be here tonight.
Yay! So you got your little girl from your bonus child.
Yes.
You know, I have two sons and I have two daughters, and anyone who knows me knows that I have a love for education, and I have grown a huge disdain for the way our children are educated. I wish it was so different. It is so hard nowadays, especially when you have a differently abled child. And that could be someone um, who it needs has a disability, or someone who is gifted and just not challenged. What made you take up the mantle to say, I want to speak out for these children in particular?
Because a lot has to do with my own children. Because when my oldest son, who is now 30 years old, was in elementary, we wanted to have him tested for gifted. We were one of a very small segment of Black people that had moved into the neighborhood. And so our kids were the first to attend this brand new school. And they fought against me having my son tested for gifted.
Wow.
And it's like, but I see his peers, his friends that don't look like him, they were
Mm.
in the gifted program without an issue. And so, myself and their dad, we had to advocate for them. When my son is scoring the highest in math, level five, and level five was the highest at the time, why is there a problem with him being in a gifted program? So from that point on, I left the hotel industry, and I became an teacher. And I started teaching in special education services so that parents like myself who had smart boys, black boys, would not be excluded from being in the gifted programs. And so that's where it began. And through the years, I've seen things from the inside out. And
Mhm.
so that's what I worked on when I did my dissertation. It was about our black boys in special education. So it's just been a passion of mine because I see from the inside, and I also saw as a parent of a black male who was smart, who was gifted, but was trying to be excluded from that particular program in the public school sector.
Yeah, and it's, I just said to a girlfriend last week that in the United States, education, public education is a requirement. We have a duty to educate our children. We have a duty to do it safely and to do it in the least restrictive environments. And um, I've battled that for so long, as a parent. I have two children who were in special education. And then I had in Pennsylvania, they call it a GIEP, so a gifted child as well. And the barriers that are put up in front of you when you're just trying to advocate for your child, and the amount of ages and stages, regular things that are criminalized, that are um, used to basically oppress, basically dismantle the self esteem of our children is astronomical. Tell us a little bit about the kinds of things that you have had to advocate for from the inside.
The first thing is people have to recognize that they do have internal biases when it comes to our black boys. And until they can truly admit that, there will be no change. I see it. Like I said, I'm the administrator over our ESC services, which unfortunately is disproportionately black males. That's a whole nother story. um, but I interact with my black male students as if they're young men. And so my thing is people are often intimidated because I treat them like they're my sons because when they're at school, they are mine. And so I have to let them know that just because, he may have a bad day or may have a bad period, he doesn't need to be written up on a referral because you
Mhm.
keep that's a track that's a they're trying to do a paper trail. And so
Mhm.
I'm like, no, if he wants to come to my office and have a seat and we can chit chat for a little while until he regroups, that's what I advocate for. Is that always received? It's not. Currently, I am the only black administrator at my school. And so kids that look like me, they are drawn to me. And I
Mhm.
know that God has placed me there for that purpose. And so I advocate for them. I advocate for them for not to be receiving referrals that are not warranted, suspension that is not warranted. Sometimes it's just a matter of just having a conversation because oftentimes our black males feel unheard. Even in middle school, they feel unheard. And so if I can be that source of them just sharing out so that they're not getting frustrated, because that's what happens when you don't listen to them and you don't hear them, then they'll act out. Well, we all want to be heard. And so my office is that platform for them to be heard. And then I can work with their teachers and whomever to get them back on track without them getting consequences for what they say is a behavior.
And like you said, people have to be receptive to even the idea that they have a bias, even the idea that there could be a different way. How do you tackle and manage the difference between the code of conduct versus whether someone has a manifestation of their disability when there is discipline involved?
First of all, for me, it has been getting to know my students, having conversations with them in the cafeteria, when they're walking the hallways, but just having that open dialogue and conversation with them. I've learned my students the last 3 years. The kids that I'm with now, I had them there in sixth grade, so I've seen the growth and I've seen the maturity, and they know that I am a safe space. If they don't believe something is right, I've taught them first of all, advocate for yourself. Do it the
Mhm.
right way now, but advocate for yourself. But For me, it's just listening to the kids, talking to them. We know if they have a disability, for instance, in speech,
Mhm.
that could be their IEP says they have speech impairment. Now, if they're fighting someone for no cause, for me, that's not a manifestation of your disability because
Mhm.
you're consciously aware of what you did because you had opportunity to think before you did that. So for me, is that some things I sit in IEP meetings all the time, and some students, I'm like, but if you have a learning disability, that's not a behavioral. That's not you're not a student with an emotional disability. So for me, you understand what you've done. And
Mhm.
so for me at that point, it's not a manifestation of your disability. But first I have to know what the kid's disability is based on what they've done, the infraction. And from there, there's times that, it's a committee's decision. However, I will voice my concern if I don't think it's a manifestation. Now, if it is a manifestation, I'm going to advocate for them. But sometimes it's not a manifestation, but we use the IEP and the special education umbrella, if you will, to say that it is. And my goal at the end of the day, like I tell everyone that I work with, I want these kids to be prepared because once they leave the walls of public school, they're looked at differently. And as we know, because we see what happens in the communities,
Mhm.
sometimes our officers don't understand what an IEP is. They don't understand a disability. So I want them to be able to function once they graduate from a public school setting because they're treated. It's going to be a different game at that point.
Mhm. How do you help bridge the trust gap? You know, at this point, so many parents of Black boys don't trust the schools. And I think schools have given parents good reason not to.
Great.
So when we're in situations as a parent where you want to have conversations about your child's therapeutic journey, have conversations that are vulnerable in the sense that you're putting something on a record that could potentially be used against your child. What are you doing in your school to help bridge that trust gap?
For me, my school is probably about 20% African American. And so we have about just under 300 students that are students with special needs. For me, it's just being upfront and honest with parents because sometimes the parents come with a defense up over the phone, but typically once they get to actually meet me, because I invite them into my office and we have open conversations, and I also share my background, my story with them, and then they understand. Okay, she really does care about our children, and even some of those that don't necessarily look like me. Once I got them in the office and they sit down and talk to me, they realize that just because your kid is not a Black kid, I advocate for all students,
Mm,
but your kid is the kid that I'm directly responsible for. And so then they realize, and then they change their tone because, you know, again, those personal biases, they were under the assumption, no, my goal here is to help all kids, but I'm responsible for these 300 students that are students with disabilities, whether those kids be Black or white. So for me, it's just been having those open conversations and dialogue, inviting them into the school and having rich conversations with them because oftentimes they're constantly getting calls, but the calls are not good calls. So I want to be talk about something positive and bring them in so they can see what it's like to sit in my shoe at the school and understand that at the end of the day, my goal when I'm there every day is to advocate for their children. That's it. And once they meet me and see the authenticity from me, then they understand, and so they know they'll reach out. They're like, I need to talk to Dr. Pugh. I don't need to talk to anybody else but Dr. Pugh because they know I'm going to do right by their children. So for me, it's just been that open dialogue because I was at a new school. Like I said, this is my third year there, getting to know that community because they had not had a, Black administrator in a while. So
and that's wonderful. I commend your approach to handling the students But like you said, you're the only person in the building that looks like our Black children.
Mhm.
So, how are you reaching other administrators and teachers to help them both understand their bias and understand how to approach our children?
So first and foremost, what I've done is I've kind of changed the culture of the school because I do have the ability to hire. So I'm intentional when I'm hiring as well because I have to get the best person in front of our students. But it's also important that our students see themselves when they come to school. So
Mhm.
I've hired some male Black teachers. I've hired Black teachers as well. So when I got there, I think it was three Black teachers when I got there. And one came up to me, she was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "What's wrong?" She was like, "I'm so glad to see you. Oh my God, we have a Black administrator." I'm like, "Whoa, okay." So that showed me a lot based on her approach to me. Um, and so since then, of course, I've been intentional, with hiring so that there's a representation for our students to look up to. And so for me, it's just having those rich conversations with teachers as well. And I sit down and I explain to them, and I've had professional developments when I have my team meetings with my staff. I've done school-wide training for all teachers to help them understand that at the end of the day, these are all our children and not just Dr. Pugh's ESC kids. They're our students. And so we all are responsible for them. And I'm going to give you strategies to help you teach them in your classroom, and so that you're not constantly sending them out. So it's been me just advocating for our students when I'm talking to the teachers, making sure I have different workshops to help them, because I think the biggest key that I've found is that they have to take ownership, and that these are all of our students at this
Mhm.
school. They affect our grade just like the other students. And if you help me move these kids, then the school moves.
Mhm.
And so that's been the approach, because we went from a C to a B, and we're closing the gap between our Gen Ed students and our ESC students. And that's a direct reflection of what we've been able to do as a department, and me as a leader, the last 2.5, 2 years that I've been there. So now we're entering year 3. So
Amen. Well,
education.
congratulations on that. And I'm assuming that's kind of like what you would call your culturally responsive teaching. That is the approach that you
Yes.
use in terms of helping
Yes.
to educate the educators. We do have a question I want to share.
Educate the educators.
Otis is asking, how do you motivate a student who is not interested in school or extracurricular activities because they aren't interested in higher education and don't see the benefit?
Well, for me, how I motivate, I work in middle school. So
Mhm.
the biggest motivator in middle school is food. And
Mhm.
so, when we were preparing to take our state test in May, me and some of my students, I did a bit. I'm like, I know what you've been able to do, because I see you in class, I see you making progress on your assessments. If you get this, I'll give you that. And so for me, it's just been those motivators like that, food. And so uh, the moment that I was the most proud of last year, I had a student, a male student. He was seventh grade, in my office a lot. Motivated to do well for the most part, but had some hiccups. He and I we made an agreement. I said, if you get a level 3, which is proficient, I got this for you. He was like, "Okay, Dr. Pugh." We shook hands. I'm like, "All right, this is your word." His math teacher was texting me after he finished the test, because we got the results like immediately. Not
Mhm.
only did he pass, he got a 5. That's the highest you can get. And
Mhm.
so for me, that has been a great motivator, because now he understands, yes, you may have this disability, but I knew you could do it. Now you know that you can do it. And he walks around, he's as short as me. he walks around campus now with a big chest because he finally believed in himself. And so to go back to her question, how do I motivate them? Because I let them understand that you got to get out of middle school, you got to get out of high school. Everybody doesn't have to go to college. Getting a trade, I think, is important because that's where you can make money, a good living.
Mhm.
Sometimes you'll make more than I make as an educator, and so just finding that niche, something that they're interested in, and we do bring people over from like the college to talk to our kids, to motivate our kids, to let them know that everybody's not going to take that traditional route to a 4 year university. However, they have different programs now in high school that will prepare you for a trade as you graduate from high school. So that's the motivator.
How do you celebrate the children who are not getting certificates at the end of the year awards ceremony?
One of the teachers that I work with in my department, we do a celebration every year because some kids, if they have referrals or they have these different infractions, they're not invited. So we do one for those kids that don't always get invited. And we bring over, like I said, we bring over a young man from one of the local colleges to do like a motivational speak. We cook food for them and we get to pull them out of class while everybody else is in class. They get to get pulled out of class. So I've seen it grow the last 2 years, and we just want to continue to expand that because for me, middle school and high school, it's about experiences.
Mhm.
And I don't like when kids don't get to have that true experience. And so one young lady I know last year, she's in high school this year, she did something. Was it the right thing to do? No. But our eighth graders typically go to Washington, D.C. And
Mhm.
so they were going to pull her away. And I'm like, that's not fair. It's not fair. I said, I don't agree. And I stood on it. And I talked to her and I talked to her father because he was going to lose his money. And so then I had to go to the person over me. But she was able to go on that trip because I think she needed that experience. Because a lot of times I've also found that locally kids don't really go outside their local community. And you
Mhm.
can't grow and expand if all you know is within your local community. So I advocate allow them to have those experiences. And if they don't have that experience, then we're going to create an experience for them. And that's what we've done.
Yeah. And I think when I my children were still in school, it was one thing that as a parent I had to learn as well. Um, Sports, for instance, there is, there's student athletes, so student comes first, and there is a component of grades that influences whether or not a child can participate in sports. Um, but I had to learn that taking away the one thing that a child enjoys is not always the answer. So taking sports away is not always the answer. Taking art away, or an after school program that they enjoy is not always the answer. We have to start getting creative about how we approach discipline with our children when they are undermotivated. If they don't enjoy school, and they enjoy sports or video games or talking to their friends on the phone, um taking things away from them can have detrimental responses. That is when we start seeing depression, and we start seeing some of those other things, and anxiety increase.
Right.
And I had to start getting creative. I encourage parents to get creative around what it is that they consider removing from their children in those types of situations. And I agree with you, experience in my household is not one of those things. I think kids need to know that their 4 block radius or the 4 walls of their school is not where the universe lies. And there are so many successful people out there that had hard beginnings for whatever reason, whether that was trauma at home or what have you, whatever the situation was. And, you know, they grow up and they still become. How do
Right.
you instill you can still become into the children who can't see it?
Because, and that's a good question because people, my students see me, oh, she's Dr. Pugh. And so I talked to, well, this was at a former school, but I've shared some with some students at my current school. We had a mentoring group for boys. And so I went to them and I shared my story, and they were in awe of what my experiences are because I am the product of a teenage mother and father.
Mhm.
My mom was 15 years old when she had me, and my father, my birth father, spent 25 years in prison. But to look at me, the kids didn't know that and they didn't believe that, and I had to let them know that yes, I am you. I am
Mhm.
you. However, for me, education is why you see Dr. Pugh the way you see Dr. Pugh today. I could have gone anyway, but I chose to use education to get me to this point. So
Mhm.
I don't really want to buy excuses from you all because I'm the product of the same things that you've experienced in your life. And for me, if I knew I didn't want to repeat some of those things that could have been generational, then this is the course that I've taken. And so they know you can't bring Dr. Pugh excuses because I've been there, I've done it, I lived it, and this is why you see me the way I am today. So I use my experiences as a way also to encourage them. Yes, you may not have a father in the home. Yes, you may have a parent that's on drugs. However, that does not have to be you. Middle school kids tell you everything, everything, way
They
more than
tell
I
all
want
the
to
business.
hear, way more than I want to hear. Be like, woo, okay. But I have to be the voice of reasoning because I mean, I had a young lady say, well, they said I'll never be anything. I'm like, you can be whatever you choose to be. You don't have to live like your parents did. You
Mhm.
can break that. You can change the trajectory of your life by coming to school, doing what you need to do, and get into the next level. And so, these kids, they see me black and white, and they hug me every single day. I always make sure that I present myself in a way that is they see that they can be. And that's what I want to convey, that they see through me that they can.
Amen. Amen. How do we fix the system?
Oof. Well, my son said I need to run for school board. I'm like, I don't know if they're ready, son. But I think
Ready, we ready.
because sometimes when you just see, you be like, that doesn't make sense to me. And you make these laws, you make these rules, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. How to change? I think the biggest advocates for me would be parents. I think it's important that you go to those school board meetings, not just to, if they win a football state championship.
Mhm.
Go to the school board meetings. It start at the local level, and
Mhm.
that's what we invoke change at the local level. Go to those school board meetings. Make your voices heard. You have a couple of minutes on the agenda. Get on the agenda. Know who your school board representative is. Reach out to him or her and share your concerns, and basically force them to hear you.
Mhm.
We know they have their own governing, but at the end of the day, it's our children. They're here for our kids. We're here for our children. So we have to be the voice of change. We have to be the voices for our children when they can't speak for themselves. And so I think it starts at that local level, getting active with your local school board.
And I hear you, but I'm gonna challenge you just a little bit. And I'm gonna challenge you because I work from home. And
Hmm.
I am extremely blessed to be in the job that I'm in. And I can get up and I can go to the school at the drop of a hat if I need to. And if I want to speak at a school board meeting that's happening at 1 p.m. in the middle of the afternoon, 30 miles away from most people's jobs here in Houston, I actually can do that. I can call fellow parents and say, hey, what do you need me to convey on your behalf at this school board meeting because they are 30 miles away and can't? What do schools need to do to incorporate that single mother who's working a 12-hour shift or the parent who has a night shift job? Because I hear you when you say show up for the football games, The football game is at 8 o'clock. The parent teacher conference might be in the afternoon, might be at 4 or 5 o'clock. The PTA meeting is in the middle of the day. The school board meeting might be at 12 o'clock. So, yeah, we're rooting our children on at 8 o'clock, but our shift has ended and we have an opportunity to be there. And not all parents do. So, what should schools start doing to understand and incorporate the fact that not every household looks the same? We don't have bankers' hours, we don't have teachers' hours. And parents and families and caregivers should not be villainized for not being there or accused of not caring,
Right.
because that's what I see a lot. Parents who can't be there are accused of not
Mhm.
caring because
Mhm.
the only time you meet them is at graduation. And that was the one day that they can get off to keep a roof
Mhm.
over their kiddo's head. It doesn't all translate the same way. So how can schools partner better with parents?
Uh, I think, for one, COVID was horrible. However,
Yeah.
I think what COVID taught us is that you don't have to do everything face to face. You're in Houston, I'm in Florida, and we're able to communicate. And so
Mhm.
I think, I know in my district, we've kept, like, even with our IEP meetings and with our parent teacher conferences, we can do them virtually. And so that gives parents an opportunity to show that they are concerned about their children, but I got
Mhm.
to work. So,
Mhm.
and we try to schedule, I know I make sure that our IEP facilitator who schedules our meetings for our students with disabilities, we reach out to the parent and find out what time works for them. And then we
Mhm.
try to work around their schedule. And it's funny when you say Houston, because I lived in Houston for several years. And
I'm
I
s-
can remember, I can remember, I wanted to be a part of the it was PTO at that
Mhm.
particular school.
Mhm.
I would have to leave my job in the middle
Mhm.
of the day. Thankfully, I had some flexibility. Leave my job in the middle of the day, drive all the way to Humble, Texas, where my
Mhm.
sons went to school, just to be a part of the PTO, and then drive back to work, because those moms had the flexibility of being stay-at-home moms. I wasn't. But thankfully, I was in a position where I could leave work to come, because I wanted them to know that I am involved. I am concerned about my two sons that are at this school. And I think with doing things virtually has been a game changer, if you will. Um, for me, I talk to parents, let me know what time you can meet. If I
Mhm.
need to go in a little bit early to accommodate you, then I do that.
Mhm.
I always stay late anyway, which I shouldn't, but I stay late.
Mhm.
If I need to stay a little bit later just to give you an opportunity to have dialogue and conversations, then I do that. I'm able to call parents from my computer at home. So if you tell me to call you at 7 o'clock, I actually can call you at 7 o'clock at night, because I'm calling you from my computer, which we have it on our system where we can call parents. So I think that has been the game changer. Just because I'm not able to come in physically at the school, but I'm still able to have conversation and dialogue with you about the betterment and well-being of my kids. So that's one way schools can, support the working parent, because I know I have to work. And if I
Mhm.
still had kids in school, then technology has been a game changer, and I will be able to communicate like that. So I think that's been the biggest takeaway. And I think more things should be done where we're streaming things. I know we have different programs at school that parents can't come, stream it. So if they're, or at least they can see their kid and they can say, I was there. Because
Mhm.
that's important too, for children to know that mom and dad, they do support me. They're there. They may not be physically here, but they're on. They can actually see what I've done. So I think that's one way for schools to do so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I live in Cyprus, so since you are familiar with Texas, I live in Cyprus, and the Cyprus school district is challenging. My son, my 18-year-old, attends a school that is only 13% African American, um, and that is probably the biggest hurdle. Like, just understanding the difference in culture. Um, it's it's a fear, it's an irrational fear that teachers that some teachers and some administrators have when they are dealing with that eighth grade growth spurt, right? When they're dealing with that kid that doesn't look like anybody I grew up with in my neighborhood, where you have this irrational, understated idea that this kid is bad or aggressive or a criminal just because of the color of their skin. How do you educate your staff, the teachers in the building? And I hear you talk about those who are interacting with the 300 students that you have charge over, but there are other students in the building. How do you deliver that same message to general ed educators as you do to your sped educators?
The same. At the end of the day, I had a young man that was there last year. I don't know, that boy was probably like 6'4". So he's big. He
Mhm,
stands out. And so at the end of the day, but he's still a kid. He's still 12 years old. And
mhm,
so you have to see him as a 12-year-old kid, not as a 6'4", 200-pound black male. He is a kid. And so I think that's been the charge for me, is just letting them understand and realize, treat them like you would want us to treat your child. If your kid was at this school, how would you want your child to be treated? Because that's how I've lived all 23 years of my career. How would I want people to treat Rudy and Rakeem, which are my sons? And so
mhm,
that's what I do for the other kids. And so I share that same message with my staff. That could be your kid. Would you want someone to judge him or her just because they look different?
mhm,
Just because they look different. Our boys going to face enough challenges outside of school. They shouldn't have to face it in school. Do they face it? Absolutely. I'm not crazy. Absolutely. But as educators, we're supposed to be there to help them, not be the ones that create the roadblocks for them. And
mhm,
so, is it tough conversations? Absolutely. But as leaders, you have to engage in tough conversations. And if that means bringing people in my office and having a private conversation, then I've done that as well. Because at the end of the day, treat these kids like you want your kids to be treated. When kids come to school, that's a safe space for them, and they should feel that the people that's in front of them have some sense of care and concern about their overall well-being. So
mhm,
for me, it's having those tough conversations, just being intentional, making sure they understand that he can't help. He's 6'4". It's his genetics. You know what
mhm,
I'm saying? But at the end of the day, he's a goofy kid. That's
mhm,
all he is. And then I've talked to him too. And I'm like, dude, you got to bring it down, because if they see nobody else, they're going to see you because you're 6'4". You hover over everybody. And they was like, okay, Dr. Pugh, I understand. But at
mhm.
the end of the day, at heart, he's a kid. He's still
Yeah.
a child.
Boss up and raise your boys. Tell us about it.
Ooh, okay. Boss Up and Raise Your Boys is my first book, outside of my dissertation. Um, and I wrote the book to talk about my sons.
Mhm,
Like I said, I'm the mother of two young men, 28 and 30 years old now. But people would always say, Sherry, how did you do it? Rudy and Rakeem this, Rudy and Rakeem that. And so I'm like, So in 2018, myself and two of my friends, we went to University of Florida on the weekend, and a young lady was presenting a writing course. And so we was like, okay, we're going to write our books, because we had been talking about it, but we never did it.
mhm,
This was in 2018. 2023, the things that I've always instilled in my sons, they put it back on their mother. Okay, mom, you've been talking about this book. You've been talking about this book. When you gonna finish this book? And I'm like, ooh, okay. They gave it back to me. So it was strategies that I used throughout the years with raising my sons, and they are the reason that in 2023, September will be 1 year since the book was released, that I actually finally finish this dream and this goal that I had in mind. So that's why I did it, to share
So
strategies for
what does
moms.
boss up mean?
It means take responsibility, take accountability for raising our sons. Our sons are kings, and we have to let them know that from the very beginning. And I've always taught my sons, you're not better than anyone, but you're not beneath anyone either.
Mhm.
And so that's how I want you to carry yourself. And their dad was very he always told them manners will take you where money won't.
Mm.
And that means at the end of the day, you don't have to go to the school at any other kind of way, but the way we've taught you, because at the end of the day, you got a mom that will advocate for you. So for me, boss up means take ownership, take responsibilities, make sure that we're producing young men that will be positive and productive in society. They're going to give back to their communities. We're going to be proud that these are the young men that are coming behind us to carry the mantle, to carry the family, to carry the culture. So that's what it means when they say it's boss up.
All right. And you said your children, your sons gave you back just what you gave them, huh?
They did. They
For
did.
sure. Well,
They did.
congratulations on the
And they still
anniversary.
doing it too. I'm like, okay, I got you.
Ah,
Thank
well,
you.
boss up and raise your boys, Dr. Sherry Pugh. Where can people find your book?
It's on my site, and I can drop it in the chat, or I can
Hmm.
share it with you, and you can share it with the audience. Whatever you want me to do.
Hmm.
Um, I have my own website. It is on Amazon. However, it's also on my platform, so I'm taking out the middle person, if you will.
Hmm.
And so I have it on my own site.
We certainly will share that and feel free to drop it in the chat. We have another
Okay.
question in the
Yes.
audience. Why are so many schools failing at preventing bullying, especially cyberbullying?
For one, I'll speak here in Florida.
Hmm.
Ours, elementary and middle school, the phones were, oh my God, they were such a distractor.
Hmm.
And so kids would hide behind bullying on their phones. And so when they do it on their phones, they bring it to school and then we get involved.
Hmm.
Um, that has helped a lot with the ban of the phones in Florida in our schools with that. I think the thing is because so much happens outside of school with
Hmm.
their technology, but then the parents call the school and then we have to try to cipher through everything that happens because of that phone or them on I don't know, Snapchat, all the different platforms that the kids are on now. And that was about 3 years ago, that took about 30 to 40% of my day trying to investigate what someone said on a social media site, who said what, then bringing the kids in, trying to figure out what went on.
Hmm.
Thankfully, we don't have that issue has subsided now because we've pretty much banned them having their cell phone out during school time. Um, but I know here where I'm at, if there's repeated um, issues with bullying, cyberbullying, we do a bullying packet and we investigate. We involve both sides of the parents, all the students involved, and it follows them. It becomes a part of their permanent school records.
Hmm.
And so then the person that was bullied, they have an option to, choose to go to a different school through a scholarship that we have here in Florida. I think with the change in our law, it has helped to reduce the bullying as far as cyber. Now, the bullying at school in person, that still happens, especially in middle school. It's like, oh my God, stop, girls, please. Um, and so it's the girls, in middle school, it's the girls. And so, we're having to cipher through that, but I try to get all parents involved, get the students involved, my counselors involved. We put different contracts in place to try to keep the kids separate from each other. Does it always work? Absolutely not. It's middle school. It's middle school. But we do our due diligence to investigate and put measures in place to keep the students away from each other. My school, we have a resource officer on campus. She's very friendly. The kids know that they can also go to her. She's around campus. She's talking. They had a lead program to help students also with dealing with that and how to prevent it. Again, will it stop? It's middle school. No, it won't stop. But we do our best to try to resolve the matters peacefully. If not, then again, like I said, there's a bullying packet that follows them throughout their career in our public school system here. But again, for me, we receive kids. We accept all the baggage that they come with, and
Mm,
sometimes once we get other people in front of us, we realize, okay, that's where some of this comes from. Because sometimes we have to tell a parent, okay, mom, you can't go to the house and say you're gonna help your kid fight. You can't do that. It's like, no, that's not okay. And that has happened. And I'm like, that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. And so just trying to help the parents learn how to deal with conflict just as well as the kids learning how to deal with conflict in a peaceful manner.
what restorative practices do you use in your building?
We used to have a program here in our district. Some use it. It's not necessarily required, if you will, anymore. But we do try to do the circles. We talk with the kids to help them understand that, you know what, bring them together with the school counselor
Mm,
and just have them have a conversation. Okay, do you realize what you did wrong?
mm,
Yes, no. If you don't, then let me explain it to you. Now, if that happened to you, how would that make you feel? Have conversation. Then they realize, okay, I do see now. Yeah, that wasn't the right thing to do. And so just bringing them together in a peaceful manner, in a calm manner with the adults to help mitigate and speak about what they've done and
mm,
how they should move forward. Like I tell the kids, you all don't have to like each other. Not saying you have to be best friends,
mm,
but at school we have to be tolerant of everyone because everyone has a right to be here. And so you can't say something that's going to be, so detrimental or negative towards this other person. You don't have to be friends. Y'all don't have any classes together. You don't sit at lunch together. You don't ride the same school bus together. So you know what? You don't have to see each other. And
mm.
your peers don't have to instigate on your behalf either.
How has education changed from when you were a parent in school to 30 years later, 25 years later? Um,
Yeah. How has it changed since my boys were in school or since I was in school? Since my boys were in school, whew, well, it used to be technology because when they were in school, they didn't have cell phones. I didn't have cell phones. They did when they got in high school. It's changed that way. I think I would say unfortunately the bullying is more intense and more aggressive and more. Sometimes kids are just mean. And I was talking to my oldest son before I got on tonight, and we were talking about students with disabilities, and he was like, well, I was never mean to them. I'm like, you weren't, but other people sometimes are,
mm,
because I taught you differently. And then for me, I think, that involved parent, being on the inside as an educator, so I kind of knew things that were going on so that I can talk to my sons about it. I think now I see a lot of grandparents being the caregivers of their middle school children. Um, and, the one of the parents, she said, she was like, I'm tired.
mm,
I've raised my children, and for whatever reason, now she's raising grandchildren who are smarter, especially with technology,
mm,
than they are. Because in Volusia, we have it's 1-to-1, so kids have a computer, and so we can see when they're doing something they're not supposed to, or going to sites they're not supposed to, and so um, I'm able to share that. I'm like, this happened at 1 o'clock in the morning. Why are they still up? So I think that the technology has changed because it's so accessible, if you will, because
mhm,
we want kids to have technology, but there should also be some limitations on the use of technology. For my sons, it wasn't like that. We had computers in the home, but it was monitored. Um, with the cell phones, it's no monitoring, if you will, unfortunately for some. So I think that's the biggest change, technology,
Mm.
and the use of it in the school since my boys were students a
We
while
had
ago.
Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yes, they was like, "What's that?"
You had to borrow X from the neighbor.
Right? Yeah, I remember that. Yes, and go to
Yes,
the
we did
library.
reports with
Yes,
books, and we went to the library, and I had a
yes,
library card, and
yes.
you wrote and printed your report so your teacher could read it. It was very
Read
different.
it.
I know for me, I think for me, the evolution of school, and my children are 30, 25, 23, and 18. And um, they were educated in New York, Pennsylvania, and Texas. And I think like just the evolution of what resource officer means, right? And the things that have become criminalized, like two kids fighting, which is normal. Not that it doesn't need to be dealt with, but it's normal.
Mhm,
Um, the I've seen schools use lunch as punitively. If you were late for school, you got a different lunch than everybody else. The way that many teachers, in my experience at least, are so dedicated to their contract. You know, if you don't reach them by 3:20, 3:21, it's a done deal. You can't call them. And nobody likes working for free. So that's not an indictment
right,
uh, on teachers. But by trade, I'm a nurse. And there were times that, the horn sounded, but a patient needed me.
right,
So I was still there. Or
right.
a parent needed me. So I was still there. And I miss the educator that puts the kid first.
Mhm.
I miss the idea that if my child fails 4 tests in a row, that you want to know why, and
Mhm.
we can have a conversation instead of me finding that out at the end of the marking period where there's no opportunity to make those changes. Um, and so, what do you view in a time where great teachers, good teachers, by and large, can go to the private sector and make more money, have a easier job, because those are the privileged, and there's typically less behavior issues and that kind of thing. Um, they also don't have, in most cases, armed security in those schools. How can we get that caliber of teacher in back into our public schools? And not that they don't exist, because obviously they do. But how can we get more of that? How can we get more of that teacher that is going to stay to 4 o'clock because you're in the middle of a conversation and you're troubleshooting an issue, or that is going to make that extra phone call to make sure that a parent is aware of what's going on with their child, or that's paying enough attention that they realize that kiddo is sad today and all last week, and that's different for that child. What can we do to change the climate overall of who teachers are, what they're looking and willing to do, and how they interact with families?
For me, I think is respect. It goes back down for me, respect. Um, this year, this is the first year since I've been at this school that I actually put up copies of my degrees and my credentials
Mm,
in my office. It's a level of respect. I try my very best to make sure that the teachers that I work with, I respect them because most teachers have 2 degrees.
mhm,
Most teachers they have an undergrad degree and a master's.
mhm,
And so I think it goes back to not only internally with the schools in the school districts, but outside of the schools, the respect from parents, the respect from our political figures, our
mhm,
politicians, the respect has been lost. And so sometimes some people it's just unfortunately it's just a paycheck. And that's
mm,
the unfortunate part of it because I come from a family of educators, and it was like you were proud to be an educator. Was education my first career? It was not. But when I saw things needed to change, then I can only change from, for me, it was from the inside
Mhm.
by being a part of the public school system. But for me, the biggest is just to bring back the respect for teachers.
Mm.
We are asked to do some things that are just beyond wild to me.
Mhm.
And I had a conversation with some people just recently because we've changed the way we do some things here in Florida. I don't necessarily agree with them.
Mm.
I'm not a security officer. I'm an educator.
Mm.
I'm an educator. But the governor here is making teachers, schools, everything is locked. And I'm all for school safety. I am
Mm.
all for school safety. However, we are a school. Every gate is locked. You can't get in. Every building is locked. You have to have a key. If the gate is open outside, you have to be within arm's length to close the gate.
Mm.
It's just insane to me right now. But I'm trying to, talk to my teachers, talk to myself. It's like, okay, I understand this, but this is a bit much because to me that helps. To me, just sharing that criminalizes schools because it's like you're on lockdown. It's like we need to get back to the point where kids are free to be children.
Mhm.
Yes, we have some crazy people, we do, but there are some things that they can do regarding that they're not doing. That's politics, and I don't want to get into the politics of it all because I have my own opinion about certain things. But schools are a place of learning, and
Mhm.
right now, I know for some of the people that I work with here in the state of Florida, everything is it's like you're on lockdown, like you're in prison. Kids walk out of the door, but they can't get back in
Mm.
unless someone's there to unlock the door to let them in. So for me, bring back respect and bring back the true meaning of what school is: a place of growth, a place of learning, a place of development, a place of discovery.
Mhm.
That's what schools need more now. I understand the safety. I get it. Safety
Mm.
is our number one. We got to make sure the schools are safe, but it also has to be a place where kids want to come and want to learn, want to grow, want to explore, and want to grow. And I don't know if that's the case right now,
Mm.
unfortunately. And teachers feel the same way.
Mm. How are you managing today's conversation around critical race theory, books being banned, Black history, what we can and can't say in school?
I don't want to be a rebel, but I'm like, we celebrate Black history. Was it always celebrated at my school? No. Has it been celebrated since I've been there? Absolutely. And so we're going to continue to expand and grow it. I have some teachers that's willing to work with me, and so we do it. I was a part of our district banned books, if you will. I know some of the books that I read. I'm like, okay, this is what happens in middle school. Why are we banning stuff like this? They need to read it because this is what's happening. So I know the people that was in my group, we voted to keep the book. What Florida did was try to be slick. You have to opt in as opposed to opting out, and most people don't understand the difference. So that's
Mm.
how they play what you hear in Florida. Like, okay, governor, yeah. Um, I talk about. I'm a proud people. I talk about it. It's in my office. Some teachers were afraid. I'm like, afraid of what? This is our history. These kids need to know. Do I wear my beautiful African attire? I do. And guess what? I have so many kids that don't look like me coming and say and asking me about it. So for me, that's a conversation starter. And so I'm committed to doing it. I'm committed to growing the program that we're going to have. Last year, we brought in some young men from one of the fraternities, and
Mm.
they stepped doing all of our lunches, and the kids were like, whoa, blown away. And so we're just going to get bigger and expand and do more this year because I got more people that's willing to work and help work with us. And so that's what we're going to do because my history is American history. It's US history. It's our history, and our kids need to know it, and I'm going to share it. And I'm not going to be quiet about who I am because I love who I am.
Amen. Amen. Standardized testing. I know what it is here in Texas. I don't know what
Me
it is
too.
in Florida. Teachers, in a lot of places are encouraged to teach to the test, and it changes the way um, the interaction of education, in my opinion. When you are so hyper focused on making sure your school gets a particular grade or kids get a particular grade on standardized testing, the anxiety building of the tests, especially for individuals who don't test well, the innate bias that exists in standardized testing for our Black children. What do you feel about that? And what are some of the ways that we can improve that?
I do understand from because my boys were in Texas, so they started in Texas and they finished out in Florida with the standardized testing. I think there's other means to assess whether students are knowledgeable in a certain area.
Mhm,
I think once they put money behind schools getting graded, I think that was the change in
mhm,
how teachers teach because now if your school grades goes up, then you're incentivized. So that kind of led to people saying, well, we're not teaching to the test, but we're going to teach you this to make sure that you get this and you understand this. I think now in Florida, we use fast testing. So we do an assessment at the beginning of the year,
mhm,
then we do one at the mid year, then we do one at the end. So the goal at that point should be okay. You may not know this at the beginning of the year in August. By December, you should know this. And then by the end of the year, you should know that. And so I think that is a better indicator as
mhm,
opposed to that one big state assessment at the end of the year that was
mhm,
stressful for everyone.
mhm,
Um, I can remember being in Texas when my boys took I think it was a TEKS, I forgot, I think it's a TEKS test. It was a standardized test in Texas, and they sent it to us in the mail. So we had to go to the mailbox. Yes, this was in the early 2000s, to the
mhm,
mailbox and open up that. And I was a nervous wreck as an adult saying, Lord, I hope my child passed. They passed, but I'm like, just the anxiety of it all was insane to me. But I think the way we're doing it now, because you have that beginning point, that benchmark point, and then teachers, okay, you're responsible for teaching this, and then we're going to assess where the kids are in mid-year. You're responsible for teaching this, and now we're going to assess again at the end of the year. Is a better indicator because for me that one shot end of the year standardized test, that was, to me, that's not it,
yeah,
because especially when you have kids that are making A's and B's throughout the whole school year, but then you get to the end of the year and you can't pass the test. So did they really learn? Because if
mhm,
they were learning, then they should have been able to pass. So then that was another conversation. So I don't, teachers now not so much teaching to the test, teaching the standards, teaching the benchmarks that the test is going to cover, for me is a better indicator. And the way we're doing it now, kids take ownership in it because they see their growth. They
mhm,
know what areas they're weak. And so then you can be intentional with your remediation
mhm,
for these kids. Because if I don't understand how to do, I don't know, solving two-step equations, if I'm low in that area, now I know, okay, I need to work with Sherry on this.
mhm,
I may need to work with Rudy on something different. So you can be intentional with it. And then we offer, tutoring programs after school, before school to help close and bridge that gap. So I like the way we're doing it now. I did like the way we were doing it when my boys were in school. When it was just that one shot.
mhm.
It was stressful for me, and I wasn't taking the test. It really was because I just saw kids have so much anxiety around one test. One test should not make or break a child's entire school year. So I'm glad to see that there's some change here when it comes to that. And kids now have taken more ownership because they're able to get immediate feedback on how they're doing, which is, to me, is the whole point of us learning. If I know I'm not doing so well here, then I can get extra help. And then the next time I see this, I should be able to show that I understand now and got it.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I agree. Well, we are at time. I just have one last question for you. No, we are, and this was a wonderful conversation. So thank you. Um, I want to give you an opportunity. Two tips for educators, two tips for parents.
Ooh, for educators, treat children the way that you want your kids to be treated. And when you walk in the classroom or walk into your building, every day is a new day. And don't hold grudges to children because guess what? There's just that they're children. They come with baggage. It's not their fault, and so every day is a new day for children. Parents, stay active, stay vigilant, stay involved, ask questions. Don't stop asking questions if you don't understand something, or you ask questions because that's the most important thing. Because sometimes the jargon that we use, parents may not understand. So don't feel like it's like I should know this. No, you may not know it, but ask if you're a parent with a child with disabilities. Be a part of the IEP process. It's the committee's decision. It's not just the school's decision. You're your child's biggest advocate, and make sure that your kids understand that they need to advocate for themselves as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sherry Pugh, for joining us, for being part of our talk this evening. This was great information, and thank you so much for sharing your insight. Good night, everybody.
Absolutely. Good night.